Two. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Start is Near podcast. This is episode 6. We've been doing this every week for the past 6 weeks, 5 technically, but who's counting? Anyway, welcome to episode 6. And this is the coolest podcast I know of. So please share it if you like it, and you'll love it. Share it with your friends. Share it with your enemies, share it with everyone. And with that, I pass the feather. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves as you wish. And Mike, please direct traffic. Passing the feather.
Well, again, thank you, Jamin. As per usual, it's an honor and a privilege. So again, I'm out of the loop a little bit as to where we're at with this, but we're going to talk about collective human superintelligence. Jacob, this is your first time here, but I'll let Victor and Marco kind of yield this first in terms of well, where did you guys leave off with collective human superintelligence? And people can make introductions as they go and how they feel it fits. But as we've been talking about this, Jamie, we might as well just dive in. Victor, go ahead, my friend.
Sure, mate. Yeah. So I feel like we've been making progress in terms of I've come into it with my understanding of it, and I feel like that's evolved over the last several episodes. I feel like collective human superintelligence is like distributed and like universally, like among all the humans, and is like arising in transformational conversations, right? So I find myself participating in those and like benefiting from sort of the localized like version of collective human intelligence. We're talking about something orders of magnitude larger in terms of like scale and causal potential. And so we've talked about the like how to talk about it, how to signal what it is, or point out what it is that we're talking about. And that includes things like, hashtags, naming, Chizzy. We've talked about, the kind of use cases that might, or modalities that like might crop up. We've talked about this is, infinitely inclusive. There's, if you are a human, you like are a participant in the global like human collective intelligence and are invited to create your own conversations, join those going on, contribute to the building of some of the infrastructure that you see need built in order to unlock the super intelligence part of the equation here. Yeah, so that's what I'm coming in with. I'll pass the feather.
Love it, my friend. Jamin, you want to take the ball?
Yeah, I'll take it briefly, just kind of with my latest insights, which is that, as we were mentioning earlier, the big, and you're going to learn some marketing from me. I studied engineering in undergrad and grad school, and I'm, my dad's an engineer. I come from a family of scientists and engineers. So that was all me, and I didn't even think about marketing. And then I was at Microsoft, and my cousin, who was a professor at Stanford at the time, gave me a book that he swore by, which was given to him by the head of marketing of Jack Daniels, a good whiskey with amazing marketing. So I figured if this came from the head of marketing of Jack Daniels, it's got to be good. And so I read it, and it just changed my life. And I just totally got marketing, branding, all that stuff. It's an absolutely brilliant book called The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. Read it, you won't regret it. So you're going to learn some lessons from me, which come from that and other sources. But anyway, and it was based on my marketing skills that got me promoted to corporate strategy manager at Microsoft. So, and then I was, swimming with some pretty heavy hitting sharks. But the laws of marketing, they are immutable. And it all maps to the human brain. And so from your neuroscience background, Jacob, you'll appreciate that. But anyway, one of them is when you're the market leader, especially in a new category, you don't promote yourself, you promote the category. So in this case, what I think because then everyone, consciously or subconsciously asks, well, who's doing the promoting of this category? What's the category? Conversations. Conversations. Now, they can be video conference like this one, or they can be asynchronous text conversations like discussion forums, Reddit, etc. Okay. And but conversations are conversations. They come in lots of different forms. Those are kind of two bookends, and then there's, flavors in between, and often myriad dimensions. It's all good. And we promote all these conversations. Well, wait a second. And, and we say basically conversations come together, right? Form this vast network. But the way to do that is to promote all the conversations and basically get them all into one, sort of like website, whatever. Anyway, I got to go get the door. I'll be back passing the feather. Thanks.
That's okay. I'm gonna actually ask Jacob what he thought about all that.
Yeah, I definitely get it. I definitely resonate. And I'm really excited to be here to be promoting this idea of collective superintelligence, and how we can manage like a couple of days. We're sitting at a point in human technological capacity where, for the first time in any entity that we know of, we can talk with every single one of our members simultaneously in real time, lossless compression, and understand one another. And that's huge. We're a social species, as I like to say, but oftentimes that sociality becomes very tribal, and it's not as though we're doing anything very different. Everybody's got to eat, everybody has to sleep, and if we could work together, we could start to to reflect Kardashev, spoken about before, coordinate the total energetic output of our planet. And there's more to that. I mean, like there's an asteroid that circles around us that's been valued at like $10 quintillion for of like rare earth elements. It's not as though resources are actually scarce. We're producing more food than we need. There's more energy out there than we need. It's really just that we don't know
It's
how
the
to work.
perception of scarcity, right, Jacob?
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot out there, and there's more space to go into. And it's a long-term question, but we can affect that trajectory of the human experience in short order, should we really want to get our shit together and work with one another. And I'm very excited by the fact that we have the technological capacity to do that, should we decide to.
No, that's amazing. Jamin, I assume you heard all that?
I did, 100%. Absolutely brilliant. Passing the feather.
Well, I will ask Jacob and anyone else, please raise your hand or just indicate in some way that you want to speak. And Marco, I assume that you're kind of in the background there, but you don't have to. Yeah, we'll jump in when you want, my friend. What would be some strategies that seem like axiomatic to you right off the bat, Jacob? Like just to speculate.
Oh yeah, well I'm really moved by the movement towards artificial intelligence, specifically what they're calling neural symbolic AI, which leverages the mot du jour in knowledge representation of like 2-3 years ago, knowledge graphs. This is what search is based upon. A lot of Fortune 500 companies have been using this to input their corporate data and perform knowledge extraction. If you pair that with large language models, you get, on the one hand, a deterministic representation of the truth of the entity that you're trying to record truth from, whether it be a group, a community of all people, community of all women, whatever. You record the truth of that group, and on the other hand, you have a large language model that is able to efficiently query that data entity. And there's a lot of things that you can really do with that. So I really like the idea of moving from a sort of global norm of orienting at the global scale with respect to one another through intermediates, heads of states, corporate executives, and moving from that rich club montage to a hub and spoke model where we're really orienting with one another with respect to, a database that everybody has, very easy access to, and a set of personal AI agents that are able to query within that data space and participate in the curation of that structure. And from that, we can start to do a lot of things like find our natural affiliation groups, identify solutions to longstanding problems, do sort of a what is it? One of the things I'm really excited about is a demand-driven economy where people add to the space what they want to see in the market, what they want to do with natural resources, and putting values on that so that other individuals can say, "Oh, I have the capacity to meet that that demand, and let me do that." So I really like the idea of what we can do now that we have this communicative apparatus and the computational methods to work within that. It's not far off.
Oh, it's amazing, Jacob. Thank you. Victor, I feel you vibing. What do you think?
Oh, hell yeah. And like, I don't know how to build the superstructure, or like the the thing that everyone is going to use, like right off the top of my head. But like, you know, what I heard Jacob speaking to is like, yeah, the tech is there, right? It's ready at hand, and we are right on the cusp of what it is. I mean, the name of the podcast is apt, right? It's like the starting of, right? So I don't know. For my part, I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait for like the for someone else to build the thing. I want to like build it good enough so that like I can use a version of it. Uh, so I'm like, yeah. So I'm in like hell yeah. And by the way, like people like me can build a version of it. Like can start just doing it. It's partly like a mindset shift, right? Like a perspective, right? And I find it really curious. Like, and I think that this is sort of wrapped into partially, or maybe we can pull the thread on, Jacob, what you're pointing at with like demand-driven economy, is I think that that's like not intuitive to everyone. So perhaps we can look at that a moment, and go from there. But like, there's a version, but like one of the yeah, before I hand it over, there's like a version of talking about things that makes them feel sort of like distant or somehow out of reach, right? Whereas in reality, like collective human intelligence itself is ready it is ready at hand. It's like a move that we can make to like open up to and prompt, and like sort of directly create as affordances just among us here, right? So yeah, I'm inspired by demand-driven economy. I think I'm curious, like what that looks like to enact in the small, that we can then sort of, um, you know,
Yeah.
bootstrap up into something that then is, creatable as like, artifact. Yeah.
I guess just to riff on that, there's one of the people I was really inspired by, through some reading. Benedict Anderson was writing in the 1970s, had this book called Imagined Communities. Really interesting topic. The idea was, so we have these changes in large scale political structures, and the most recent one being the nation state. It's not something that people have had nation states throughout the entirety of human existence. It came about 500 years ago or so, 3 to 500 years ago. And the idea was that this system of organizing was predicated upon having a technology that allowed for people to coordinate at the scale of nations. Previous to that, the mode du jour, were things like religion. That was a really interesting way for people to organize. There were empires going on in China and the East and the Far East, the Mughal Empire as well. A lot of those coordinative apparatuses centered around the godlike presence of an emperor. And a lot of that technology was predicated upon being able to have tales related about the stature of this singular godlike person. You could do that in a number of different ways. Oftentimes people would recourse to literacy writing. You had Hammurabi's code, and the emergence of the city-states, coordinating the behaviors of people within a local city-state. At the emergence of the nation-state, we had print capitalism. So you could print out like pamphlets and newspapers and novels, and that built the sentiment among people at the range of the people who were delivering this print capital. A shared idea of an imagined community. You never met somebody if you were living in like the Burgundy region of France who was living in Paris, maybe, but at some point you all considered yourself to be French before you were Bourguignon and Parisian, but at some point you thought of yourselves as being French. One of the cool things about the print capitalism was that it was written in a common language. Spain also was Catalan was its own thing, had its own language. But eventually, like, the range of print capitalism allowed for people to speak in a common language, Spanish, Castilian was whatever. And so, you had this political entity that was predicated upon the range of the current technology. The same thing applies to our economic systems. And, looking at the network substrate of how the economy forms is a good way of thinking about, what control points exist within this network. People who are at the center of printing presses, like Benjamin Franklin, Karl Marx, whatever, they were trying to influence what was going on in the larger political sphere. The same thing holds for people at the center of economic systems. So people who controlled railroads, had a very strong influence as far as what was going to be introduced and produced within a society. So during the first economic revolution, it was these people, the barons of the time, who really directed what was going on in the economy. And you had a lot of extractive processes occurring in the New World built upon the rails and that kind of thing. So, I really like the idea of political economy, that these two things are intertwined. And, Aristotle, again, going back to that, the politics is the beginning of what actions are permissible within a community. So when we talk about supply side economics versus demand driven economics, it's about what control points exist in the networks among people. If you have advertising and Jeff Bezos is like able to like contact everybody and has his own warehouses and is able to like push certain products to the top and maybe like produce their own products that are imitations of that thing that was really popular, and Trulia's like able to see everybody's like searches for new homes and they buy them all up, and the information side of things effectuates an ability to change the market and to drive the purchasing of particular goods, the value of certain goods, and so on and so forth. So it has to do with network control, and what we get from that is a lot of crap. We get a lot of fast fashion, we get a lot of fast food, we get a lot of the proliferation of plastics and stuff that really has no long-term reason to exist. It's simply there to create to create demand and to be bought, to produce more capital, and that capital then is just accumulated in the form of a hoard. And following again a Marxist ideology, I don't know how people are familiar with that or follow it, but being able to just hoard things causes inflation, and it leads to a lot of problems with the difference between labor and capital. Who's the guy, what's his face, Capital in 21st Century, whoever this guy is. He actually came over to Serbia at some point and it was really nice. Piketty talks about that issue and the proliferation of again control points in capital, and how like the accumulation of that then also drives downstream differences between people who are adding value to an economy and people who are extracting value from an economy. So again, going back to the control points, what we see emerging in today's space is the ability for individuals to have the same access to control points that have the highest amount of power. So what is that? It's this kind of conversation. It's this conversation in the public sphere. Previously, when it was like print capitalism, the most powerful things like asserting a message that is distributable in newspapers and whatever had limited access. You had to go through editors, you had to go through printing houses, you had to own them. You had to be like, CBS guys, the Rupert Murdochs, and you had a lot of power. Hitler also said something about that as well, but I'll just leave it at that.
I was actually gonna throw out a question there, Jacob. Yeah, Victor, go ahead, please. You've got.
I know. Whenever we touch on Hitler, it's always a weird topic.
I don't think you're on mute, Victor. You're on mute.
No, that wasn't what got my hand up. I've just been holding on to something, and I sensed like a
the
space.
Hitler.
So the thing that was coming to mind for me is, so we have like AI, again centralized now, like it's the supply is there, and like to the extent that humans start to use that, right, to enable their taking something from idea, to innovate something new, to then like create to create something that adds value, like for ourselves, right? Like I've had my creativity like unlocked and accelerated by being able to do software development in conjunction with say ChatGPT, for example, right? And by the way, if that AI is within the hands of an organization, with a powerful distributed like value ecosystem, and humans are feeding into that system, into that AI, the cutting edge innovations, the new, right? Like my concern is of then those owning the AI systems being incentivized to, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like farm innovation, innovative ideas, and get things to market faster than any human could ever do, right? There's like this sort of the extreme end of like capitalism that could look like even more narrowing of that seems to be progressing towards like narrower and narrower like scope of ownership and of value generation. So like I see this potential, right, to not do that, to create systems that are more decentralized or distributed, and to your point, like putting the tools, the most powerful tools, in the hands of every single human, sort of democratizing the access, and you know, making it sort of like the default, you know, for every single human, you know, to have that kind of access. Place would be replacing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most powerful technologies that we've invented in our lifetimes. And that's the great thing about it, is it's totally accessible. You can run it on, a local device and have adequate performance. You can run it on a distributed virtual machine and have very good performance, with, the types of protections that are offered by distributed virtual machines. And what really inspires me is, like, as we move away from like kings and emperors and heads of represent presidents who are like kings, CEOs that are like emperors, to everybody engaging in an authentic way with one another, directly. What do we do with that conversation? What do we do with that space that opens up when we all talk with one another? What is the conversation that can emerge? And for me, a very important conversation that can emerge is, all right, we got this planet, we got all these resources, we got all this talent. What do we want? Right?
I think that I need to let Jamin or Marco, either one of them who wants to step in, but please, Jamin, take it.
Oh, I defer to Marco if he's available, and otherwise
If you are available, Marco, I think that was right on time consciousness.
Yeah, no, I think, not just to answer that totally directly, but everything that's happened up to this point on the podcast is, we built a society, we built a world that's in distress right now. We have multiple polycrises, all the wicked problems of the world. And we had an experience with COVID where people had a chance that they haven't had in their entire lives in a generation before and the generation before. This constant need to meet your basic needs takes your attention away from the bigger picture. People got to sit back and they had nothing to do. They got on Zoom and they looked around. They're like, holy crap, the world's in trouble. What are we going to do about it? Well, it starts with conversation. The collective intelligence. It's not only are we at a point where AI can assist us in sorting through all these things and facilitate these conversations coming together. This is a quantum leap in my mind for what has been a really monster in my life in evil is the education system that was designed for one thing: obedient workers, and not to help us grow intellectually. So now it's like how many degrees have you got, Mike?
I have a handful. I think Jacob's probably got a handful, but yeah.
and I don't have any, but I get to associate with all of you. I get to pick your brains. I get it all for free. And I stand on the shoulders of you giants. I was in a conversation with a group of people, and somebody got on climate change, and I'm like, no, not climate change. It's global warming. It's an overheating of the planet. And I got just drawn into the whole thing, talked about marine cloud brightening as a solution. And it's like after an hour conversation, they said, so what's your degree in, climatology or engineering? Because I went through all the specs of those marine cloud brightening ships. And I'm like, oh, it's like I'm a high school dropout.
Well, that's actually technically
like,
true too, Marco. I'm also a high school dropout.
Right. I mean, I had some college, but then I saw the failure there again too. Not to be about me, but this is about the collective intelligence and how now we have this ability to freely educate each other in this incredible way. And and it's personalized now. It's like I can, talking on the phone I hated in my lifetime. I had to do it for business and many things, but I really didn't like it. Zoom, and for those people that have a spiritual connection to things, and science and spirituality and consciousness are all coming together in quantum physics and making magic real, and essentially proving that their thought can create the matter. I'm starting to ramble off point here. The fact is,
You started at
we've got-
climate change and we came to magic. You
yeah,
got this.
we've got all these polycrises going on. All these problems. People got to sit back and take a deeper look and see, and they found out that they can survive without being 80 hours a week making money for an entity to accumulate and essentially hoard. And hoard has to be probably one of the most evil words in our vocabulary. Because
Well, we were
he
kind of
who
talking about
hoards
that yesterday
deprives-
morning, right, Marco? Like there be dragons.
Yeah. Yep. So at any rate, I think you got the point where I'm coming from. That we're there right now. This is like, a step in human evolution right now, and we need to take advantage of it. And with that, I'm complete, and I pass the feather.
Thank you, Marco. And Jamin, when you're ready, come back. But Victor or Jacob, please go ahead. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, well, I guess I wanna shout out a couple of companies or initiatives I've been following. Holochain, I think, is really good. Right? Like, if blockchain on Bitcoin is really great, if what was it, smart contracts with Ethereum was really great, but they all sort of like had as this underlying notion, we're all doing the same thing, whatever. Maximizing the idea that we have a social network to begin with, and we want to like operate on top of that. And I want to have a group that is, I want to have a social network that is all people, but I also want to have a social network that is like my apartment complex, right? And we don't need to have that whole weighted system in order to do these things. I want to have an identity that is able to work with each of these hats that I put on. I think it's a really great step in the direction of reifying the natural state of the human condition in a way that has a symbolic and computable arm. I think it's really cool once we start to accumulate the subjective good, the subjective values that each person holds with respect to the varying groups that they belong to aggregate those in a database that's searchable, computable, actionable, and from which people can extract knowledge. And so the other technology I'm really interested in is this distributed knowledge graphing. Trace Labs and Origin Trail, actually operating out here in the Balkans, have developed a suite of tools that allows for, initially fast-moving consumer goods to have on their product labeling information about the origin of the goods. Who is involved in these things? Like, what does it mean to have an organic certificate or something?
Like logistic transparency or something.
Right. And using these tools, it's possible to like track the value add or add labels detailing the value add of each person's contribution to the movement of products from the natural world to the open market and eventually purchase. So from there, we've got on the one hand a system that allows for communities to say what goods they want to bring to market, and a way of tracing how people have contributed to that process of bringing goods and services to market. And from that, you can, as an end consumer, pay directly everybody involved in that. And
you've brought up civics today, and now you're bringing up ethics, right, Jacob?
I mean that's the most ethical form of consumption that's possible. and on the other hand, of having this this political entity that includes open and complete discourse of all people, that's the most legitimate form of governance that we can possibly obtain to. Nothing's going to be perfect, right? Because life isn't perfect, but within the boundary, the expanding boundary of human knowledge, having that full, like taking account of that full boundary of human knowledge, all of that stuff, that's as good as we're ever going to get. And it just continues to improve. But it took a while to get here. We had to go through like nation states and CEOs and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we did go through that. That's the happenstance of our history. But now that we're here and we're seeing the crises that are emerging, one of the best solutions that we can offer is to involve people in a complete way, and be authentic with one another, and talk about what solutions we can offer. Involve everybody in this conversation, and see what shakes out. Convince one another to, like, climate change is real, the earth is round, and all these other kinds of interesting topics. Like,
Jamin, I feel like I have to pass the ball to you now. I think it's your time, my friend.
Okay, cool. Just loving the conversation. Oh my goodness. Now, one point I want to make is hypothetically, we could be having this conversation with this amount of information going back and forth amongst us, all on Twitter. We could all be tweeting and, record short videos and tweet them out. And you guys could be sitting there, oh, Jamin just tweeted something else. Let me check that out. But imagine the friction, the disintegration, the reification. Thank you, Jacob. Right now, just consider the value of a conversation. We're humans. We're built on conversations. We eat conversations. That's how we get sustenance. That's how we live. So let us not forget the power of conversation versus all these other technologies that are out there. Because there's a lot of text-based stuff, and if I could download my social media, and then we build some app, and then we do some mapping, and and then we do some introduction. What are we going to then tweet to each other, email each other? Can we fucking take our clothes off and jump in the fucking swimming pool? It's Friday night. The water's warm, right? No one's going to bite you. Jump the fuck in. Okay.
I'm only laughing, Jamin, because Victor's catchphrase is warm context. We are creating warm context. Yeah. Anyways, Jamin, go ahead.
I like it. Warm and I'm adding wet. So warm and wet context. Okay. And there's nothing like conversation. Now, conversation includes text-based conversation, like Reddit, that sort of thing, asynchronous, etc. But conversation, okay. So, in terms of knowledge extraction from what's out there, right? I'm all for digging up a bunch of, metaphorically, digging up a bunch of soil and filtering out the little bit of gold that we can get out of it. But as any, mountaineering Canadian like Mike will tell you, it's better if we get rich ore to start with. Okay, so let's freaking pump Chizzy like crazy. Get this conversational domain rich and thriving and very multiple, massively parallel with, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Well, the conversations are out there. We just got to go find them. Once we bring them in and we properly launch Chizzy, which we can do in a matter of weeks, we don't have the luxury of time here, actually. We need to launch this ASAP. Once we launch it, guess what? The content of those conversations, recording, transcription, and all the good juice that you can juice out of that orange, now that's some rich Canadian ore that we can throw some big,
we call that
heavy
maple
Caterpillar.
syrup up here, Jamin. It's maple syrup.
I'm talking, let's manufacture some maple syrup, and then we can go extract from that, right? So that's the play here. Okay, so step number one, Chizzy. Step number two, now take that rich maple ore and extract, and not in the old model. And speaking of extraction, you talked about Rails expanding the range of extraction. Chizzy expands the range of healing. Let me just give you an example that just occurred to me. Marco and I know a person, let's not mention their name for privacy, but they happen to be the largest landowner in Nebraska, right? From an extracted model. Okay, great. Chop everything down, kill everything, and export it all to China, and make as much money as you can. Now, in terms of the range of healing, imagine we organize, and Marco, let's do this. Let's organize a meeting where we invite the microbiologists, the pollinator experts, the soil experts, the watershed experts, the indigenous medicine people from that region, right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And let's bring collective intelligence to how we can bring the most healing, not just to these, however many, I don't know, millions of acres, and the rest of Nebraska, the rest of that whole watershed. I also know one of the largest landowners in North Dakota, of all places, vast swaths of land, which are just absolutely vital ecosystems. We're killing off all the pollinators. We bring in all these experts and say, happy birthday. Here, all these experts are going to give you some free land consulting. What pollinator expert would not want to be in on that conversation? These are the kinds of things we can do with a thriving Chizzy, right?
Wait,
So
are we
get your
the
Chizzy out.
apiary now? Are we the apiary now, Jamin?
All the above. We are the apiary, right? The
We're the
apiary on
bees.
the planet of the apes. Okay. So, my goodness, imagined community. Let's imagine a world where we're all one, we're all taking care of each other, and we're all taking care of all the rest of the species. We kick that off with Food Healers, Community Cafe, that Marco just flashed on the screen, being an early predecessor to what is now modern Food Healers. We'll spread that all over the world with a thriving Chizzy, right? And then that'll start the dominoes tumbling. Basic human needs become basic human rights, and then planetary rights. Once we've taken care of our own, it's a lot easier to take care of the other animals, plants, pollinators, etc. Anyway, you get my drift. Back to my earlier comments, let's promote the category. What's the category conversations? Don't promote Chizzy, promote the category conversations. And as we do so, people will ask consciously or subconsciously, who's doing the promoting? Well, this organization called Chizzy. Well, what they're all about? Oh, collective human super intelligence. Let them find their way in, right? But we don't. Chizzy, what is this, Halloween? Chizzy, boo, boo, Chizzy, ha. No, we promote the conversation, and we promote it with hashtag Chizzy, and that's how we promote it. And anyway, you know the rest of the story, Pat.
Well, Marco, do you want to jump in there first before I pass it to Victor?
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, okay. So conversations as the ore, the source of value itself. It's just like non-obvious. I mean, to anyone that's like being in a part of being, I don't know, really depends on the kind of conversations you're having, right? But looking at like conversations as like the thing that sort of has latent value, like if you put it and choosing to engage in that way, right? It's just like I said, it's for me being a perspective shift. Yeah, okay, I'm with you, Jamin. So the category conversations, beautiful.
Jacob, go ahead if you'd like.
Yeah, I think it's always useful for people sharing a common purpose to have means of collaborating and have better means of collaborating. And I think it's really interesting to be able to do that at the scale of all people. And so, part of this being able to record, search through, and identify common group associations. Part of that idea of building a collective intelligence is the fact that it exists at multiple scales. You have people who, are domain expertise in, how to do land management and, develop pollinators and stuff like that. But we're all domain experts in our subjective desires. And I really like the idea.
This is my rule, Jacob. I apologize, but I'm supposed to interrupt. Can you explain domain expertise for people? Because this is for posterity as well.
Sure. I mean, it's just a fancy way of saying you have the experiences that are yours. You know, if you've been, I don't know, like wandering the canals of Paris for a while, you really know the canals of Paris, and that's your domain expertise. That's awesome. Like
I
sometimes
like the London cab drivers, right, in London where they have to take the test. Yeah, you know me. Go ahead, Jacob.
right, absolutely. And you know, like reifying that, I love the term, in systems that seek to aggregate, you know, collective intelligence, is a feature that that we get by having systems that, you know, aggregate collective intelligence. And I'm really excited by that because it allows for us to lose our grip on the idea that we need kings to guide us, that we need to rely upon like, what is it, some authority who may have some
Well,
like
you
connection.
brought up a lot of philosophy, actually, Jacob. I want to throw in Leviathan, right, by Thomas Hobbes.
Exactly, right. I mean, there is no such thing as an unbiased Leviathan. You know, we all have biases, right? You know, like it doesn't exist, right? Thank you.
Thank you. Go on, Jacob.
Yeah, and you know, like I like the idea of what emerges from that conversation that has scalability. And you know, when yes, conversations emerge at whatever scale people are interested in spending their time on. And yeah, like there are a lot of problems that are solved within you know, within communities that have shared domain expertise. But there are some problems that, you know, involve explicitly all people. You know, like climate change, like, you know, the ocean, you know, acidification and, you know, pollution and warming and all of that. You know, there are problems that include every single person. There are some problems that exclude particular people. Like, I'm not a part of the conversation of all women. You know, I can add something maybe, I don't know, but that's not a community that includes me. But that's a natural emergent community, and that conversation that happens when people are able to have that conversation with that community, it's kind of cool. That's a kind of cool conversation, and I'd be really interested to hear it, you know, or to hear whatever is mine to hear of that. So
For this conversation, well, you finish if you want, Jacob. I just want to say too, Jamin, you have a kind of bullet point list to give him after this, but Jacob, go ahead and then pass it to Jamin.
Yeah. So I think the technology that we're building supports a lot of those conversations, and I'm really excited by the fact that we can build that that discourse space at an arbitrary scale with respect to what groups naturally emerge.
Jamin, I felt like you were picking up on that because we just talked about this list the other day, right?
Remind me of the list.
About the differentials, let's say. And I have a question to Jacob afterwards, but I want to tie it to this first, Jamin. So we were talking the other day about this breakdown of climate change is some kind of like monolith that people can't kind of digest. You had broke it down for me in like 7 different bullet points or categories, if you will. You know, from the acidification of the ocean. You got me. Go ahead.
Okay, so we'll just take, and it's not climate change, it's global warming is the term we should.
We're looking for new
climate
names.
change.
This is all misnomers at this point. We're looking for new
Okay,
language, new
okay.
lexicon. Yeah.
Fair enough. But the first of all, it's the first one I would entitle "It's the Heat, Stupid," right? There's people talk about temperature, and temperature fluctuates all over the place, and so people just kind of like, all right, it's confusing, it's fluctuating, and yeah, there's no consensus about it. Okay, the reality is, if you focus on the thing that matters, which is the heat, we're literally taking in dozens of boops. A boop is the total amount of energy consumed by humanity in 1 year. That's a boop. Okay, we are adding many dozens of boops of net heat to the Earth atmosphere system every year. What? Dozens of boops, right? The equivalent of many Hiroshima bombs every second of energy. I mean, the amount of heat that we're taking in is just off the charts. And it's been monotonic increasing. Has it been varying? Nope. It's monotonic increasing. You could teach the mathematics of exponentials using that curve. And that's some scary stuff because it's just the rate of overheating is increasing. Very few people talk about this. Oh, oh no, it's freezing outside right now. Oh, no global warming here. You know, we're a bunch of fucking
Well, we can add
primates.
into
Let's
this
take
too, Jamie, like the computational power that Jacob or I might talk about. The computational power of everything we're doing also eats into this. But go ahead, Jamie. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, you gotta burn some rubber for Evel Knievel to clear the canyon, right? We're in the burn rubber phase right now, right? So let's burn the rubber we need to burn, and let's be clear on the goal: saving, healing, and transforming life on Earth. Because we're literally on a path to certain death within a couple of years at this point. There's only so much heat we can take, and as soon as enough ice is melted, land-based ice, to wipe out the coasts, we've just wiped out half the global economy, and 100% of transport, and 100% of XYZ, and created a whole bunch more Fukushimas. That's a toxic milkshake we cannot handle even one sip of, much less the whole shake being poured down our throat.
Jamie,
Um,
freeze?
So, pardon me? Did I freeze? I'll
Maybe
turn off my.
cut out for a second. Maybe it was you. Maybe it was me. Sorry, Jen.
Okay, no problem. I turned off my video just to make sure it's all working. But anyway, so it's the heat, stupid. And yes, you know, hey, it worked for the Bill Clinton campaign, it'll work for our campaign. And then people say, what? Okay, and then we show them the rest of the taxonomy. So there's the heat, there's the causes. There's it's the heat stupid versus the bamboozle you arguments about cyclical and I don't know what the hell else, right? And so we need to take those head on and systematically just dismantle each one, completely dismantle it. All the broken Lego pieces on the floor, sweep them up, throw them in the garbage if you can recycle them. But anyway, just gone, obliterated, no more. Here's the truth. Truth is we're taking in way too much heat, and the rate at which we're doing that is accelerating. So then we go to solutions, and then we look at the maximum potential. What is the outer bound potential of that solution? Carbon reduction. Okay, let's say you eliminate it. That's the outer bound potential. What happens? The planet actually heats up way faster in that case, but that's a tangent that we'll get to when we get into that breakout room. Cha-ching. Okay, all these go into breakout rooms. Next. Okay, so now we go through category of solution by category of solution. What are they? Carbon reduction, carbon capture and sequestration, SRM, and increase biological activity in the ocean to absorb more carbon that way, like with dumping in iron filings and stuff like that. Am I missing any, Marco? I think those are the big ones. You know, maybe, I don't know, methane digestion in the Arctic by weird bacteria or whatever. So, you know, but those, so let's just say greenhouse gas capture and sequestration from whatever phase at whatever time with whatever means. So you can break it down into these broad categories. The bottom line is if you do the math on all the above, either you have massive free energy enabling you to carbon capture and sequester, just suck all that carbon out like in the next year. We don't have anywhere near that, not by literally orders of magnitude. Okay. So at the end of the day, what does it leave? SRM. And there's only three ways of doing SRM at the scale at which we need. There are other ways that will also help. What's SRM? Solar radiation management. And then,
but what is SRM?
Solar radiation management, which is all about the following. It's all about, that's a fancy word for a very simple concept. The simple concept is reflecting a small but significant percentage of incoming sunlight back into space before preventing that sunlight to score the goal of overheating, of hitting the planet, getting absorbed and heating up. So it's all about reflectivity. So solar radiation management is about managing the reflectivity of the planet. Simple as that. The more reflectivity, the more sunlight gets batted back out into space.
that literally adjusts the energy imbalance. Right now, we're just taking in many dozens of boops per year, right? Of net heat. SRM turns that dial in the opposite direction, where we can actually be net shedding heat. Yes, actually cooling the planet. Okay. So anyway, that's a starter kit for a dozen or so topics, that just the ones I've mentioned. For getting us started, we go into those breakout rooms, and we're going to be inviting Paul Beckwith and his community of tens of thousands of followers. And these are basically mostly climate geeks and concerned people, but people who really care. We're going to invite them all in to, and let's say 1% come. Great, 1% come. If 1% come, we've got enough to fill up all 50 breakout rooms that we've got capacity here. Imagine each of them with the bot, each of them recording, broadcasting, transcribing, and inviting the world to join them. We become the largest network, climate network on Earth immediately from the flip of the switch. So let's say in the afterglow, after the podcast, starting in 51 minutes, all these 500 climate people show up, boom, right on the nose. And there's, the great Canadian Paul Beckwith orchestrating them and saying, we're going into these 50 breakout rooms, okay? Just for marine cloud brightening alone, there'll be half a dozen breakout rooms, each one for the topic, and another 5 for the 5 major research projects going on around the world. Boom, you want MCB, you got MCB. What's the other big one that competes with that? SAI, led by Professor David Keith at Harvard, funded by Bill Gates. Stratospheric aerosol injection, a really bad idea. We'll talk about that later when we get to the breakout room. Anyway, there's global warming in a nutshell. Problem, solutions. I haven't talked so much about the problem. You all know about the problem. Actually, you don't. More than 80% of net greenhouse gas emissions are directly attributable to fossil fuels, animal agriculture, or ocean activity. Take your guess. The answers are all over the map. Over 80% of net greenhouse gas emissions directly attributable to animal agriculture. So no, you don't know about the cause. There's so much you don't know. Oh my God. And what you have stuffed in there is a bunch of sawdust of all the crap that we've been pumped in our heads by the major media.
Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think here's a really opportune moment to highlight some of the affordances that we should be building into the collective intelligence, infrastructure space. So, okay, yes, there are climate conferences. They exist. There's whole communities. There's journals and all these kinds of things. It's not about a difficulty with bringing experts together to have a conversation. In a lot of the things, but I think a lot of the problem problems of these conversations that already exist is that the information that's generated by the conversations is kind of lossy. Yeah, they go into journals, but you got to read every journal, and sometimes they get translated into popular articles, but there's no way of interacting with them, of asking your own questions, and there are a whole array of alternative spaces where people are having their own conversations, and it's kind of disconnected. So one of the things that we can start to do with having a collective intelligence data space is to make the conversation a living one that involves all people, right? Yeah, so you have climate science, and the information generated by each of the individuals involved in this thing exists in a living knowledge graph or knowledge entity, a database that is both human readable and also machine computable. So there's some interesting technology that's been built over the past several decades, knowledge graphs and knowledge databases, knowledge extraction, all that kind of stuff. Victor?
Yeah, I was hoping you would expand on a knowledge graph because this is actually something that like,
As
okay, I'm going to do the affordance of like, noticing. I want um so in this conversation, like I want to come away transformed. Part of me coming away transformed is if I learn something, if I gain, some knowledge, from the conversation, right? And so here, like, I don't want to tangent off too much, but when you say knowledge graph, this is something as distinct from, say, like, a database,
It
or
is.
information, something you're speaking towards like a level of your the knowledge
there's
exists on a gradient of maybe of increasing something maybe. And I'm wondering if we could just sort of like touch on what knowledge
Yeah,
is for a moment, and what knowledge graph adds that, say, like a database doesn't.
sure, sure. So there, Jamin, unless you wanted to go ahead and touch on that as well, but I'll go ahead and launch into the knowledge graphing idea. Um, so databasing structures have been around for a while. I guess everybody's familiar with like Excel spreadsheets. There's the NoSQL model. They're all kind of nice. They all record bits of information that people would like to have out there. And the structure of them makes each of the databasing systems, it affords capacities to search through it. You can, in a lot of these SQL models, you can sort lists and have different ways of performing queries on lists of lists. And they, so there's all that. The knowledge databasing model organizes information as in ternary statements of subjects, predicates, and objects. These ternary statements exist in an overarching ontology, which includes this ontological space, includes all of the entities, each of them as individual concepts, and all of the predicate relationships that can occur between the entities. So apples, oranges, foxes, squirrels, are like, are not like, being the predicate relationships of those entities. So you can list the entities in the knowledge database in each of the and you can have them as these ternary statements. Apples are not oranges. Apples are like oranges. Apples are more like oranges than fruits, with the predicate relationship being are more like oranges. Probably you wouldn't include that in an ontology, but you could under some circumstances. So when you have these ternary statements existing in a database, another abstraction from that is to reorganize the list of ternary statements in a database into a geometric object. So apples, a relationship, are like oranges, and the apples are connected to oranges via the predicate relationship are like. This predicate relationship is an edge connecting these two entities. When you do that over a very large database, you get a geometric object that's what is it? A multi-level graph. So by multi-level, I mean that the entities have multiple connections between each of the other nodes, the other entities. And the connections are the edges between them. So it's a high-dimensional geometric object that supports computation across it. You can do things like filtering. I only want to include the edges that are in some way pertaining to similarity between entities. So when I say apples are not like foxes, I'll exclude that from whatever computation I want to include on this graph, and I will get as a result the geometric object pertaining to similarity between entities. This you can, I like to do it, from my background, by embedding this information into a two-dimensional sheet and observing the relationships between the entities. and I can see the edges between the entities. I can, click on whatever the nodes are, and I can see the things and what relates to what. You can start to think about, efficient organization of this geometric object in 2 dimensions, and you can start to observe natural clusters that are emerging in this larger space. There are other ways of doing that that recruit, bespoke languages for performing queries on knowledge graphs. Sparkle is one method of doing it, and there are some others. I'm not as familiar with that as I am with the actual concept of, looking at the topology of geometric objects and looking at the various machine learning operations that you can perform on data spaces that exist in the form of a graph. A graph being a series of nodes and connections between nodes. There are, there's a lot that you can do with that in terms of looking at also the topology of these systems, things like higher order shapes that emerge. But that's a whole nother aspect of the conversation. The point of all of this being, when we organize information into a knowledge database, we afford ourselves the abstraction of reinterpreting a list as a computable geometric object, for which there's a whole raft or rift or like series of mathematical concepts that allow for this geometric object's interpretation.
Okay, thank you.
I love it, Jacob. Go ahead, Victor. Sorry.
No, so in common, so I was anticipating actually. So let's just you've given I think sort of like a mathematical description or like a structural like definition of knowledge, and the key element of it seems to me as like relationship between concepts. That if I were to like kind of distill it down to one thing that stood out.
Yeah.
And so like I want to get back to I have like a few more questions. I wonder whether like you've highlighted like knowledge graphs sort of or included that in a few of your statements in the conversation, and I'm not yet clear like what the relationship is between like knowledge graph and like unlocking say in this case like bring it back to the the overarching concept of collective human superintelligence.
Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out. So let's say we take as a primary example everybody's social media like data set. Everybody can download their social media footprint, and let's say we use some rough tools to reinterpret your social media thing into your own personal knowledge database. So I like cheese. I enjoy long walks on the beach. Whatever. So from that, everybody has their own knowledge database abstracted as a knowledge graph as well. And the overlap of everybody's graph of personal social media knowledge gives us an ability to observe natural clusters within people's social statements. So for people that overlap with respect to I like long walks on the beach, I also like cheese, I also like this or that or the other, there's a natural clustering that emerges for all of such persons. One way of thinking about that is in the high dimensional space of people's social media social media graph, the manifolds, the structure of people's personal social media graph one can compute natural clusters overlaps between the manifolds of very many other people's social media graphs. So that's one thing that we can observe from this data product, is the natural overlaps between the manifolds of very many people's social media graphs. It's in high dimensions, but you can perform the operation pretty efficiently. What you can also do are things like look at the distance between the manifold of person A and person B. And you can compute distances between the manifolds of all such persons and see where people are dissimilar to one another. You can also do the same thing for concepts. If you're not looking with respect to individual persons, but the density of ideas about a particular concept, like, you know, climate change, for instance, or something like that, you can start to identify gaps in knowledge. And these are topologically the holes that are existent within, you know, areas of high density and low density. These are distinct topological objects with a, you know, distinct feature set. Go ahead.
I will say too that Jamin raised his hand, but Victor, go ahead and then pass it to Jamin if you can.
Cool. So, if I'm hearing you correctly, so we might, like, I might model myself and my own knowledge graph. I might like do that for another person. I might be able to compare, the you said a actually, I'm not going to try to
Manifold.
use words that I don't totally understand, but like compare
a person's what is it? A person's information in a what do they call that? In a space sustaining distance function, some.
I think you said manifold before, Jacob, but don't let me put words in your mouth.
Yeah, it is technically a manifold, a connected object in a space sustaining in a space sustaining some idea of distance.
Okay, so the in words that I'm familiar with, what I'm hearing you say is like, so yeah, it's possible to model like a person's knowledge space and to compare, like, say, or look at, the distance between, say, like my knowledge space and another person's knowledge space. Like, that's kind of interesting because, like, I think oftentimes like we end up with communication challenges if like there's insufficient overlap, or like there's a distance between the two. It can,
Yeah,
make
you
it
can absolutely do
challenging.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can look at, I'm more familiar with, this way of thinking about things versus this other person more familiar with that. And yeah, you can absolutely find commonalities of conversation as well.
So then it might be, I'm I'm the curiosity I had is sort of like, if in the context of like transformational conversation, like something is being transformed. So for example, like I can view every, I don't know, like college or like class, right, that I've ever taken is like kind of a transformational conversation insofar as like I've learned something, or any conversation just like this one where now I'm being introduced to the idea of knowledge graphs and the way of thinking. So like for me, this is a transformational conversation. I'm coming away different. So I think we could imagine, for example, like climate scientists like attempting to create the transformational conversation with all of humanity that like and that takes people from their extant knowledge graph and morphs it or transforms it in some way where like now they like understand, or like have shifted to a knowledge space where global warming is sort of they understand it. They are transformed to be in like some sort of a different state.
Yeah.
I wanted to pause for just a second and say like if that's so I'm sort of interjecting a kind of, theory of change about how people, change their minds, right? And I'm aware that is of limited effectiveness, given that part of what uh, that the knowledge or sort of rational like understanding of the world comprises only a part of one's perspectives on things. There's this part of transformational conversation, I think, that occurs not by, say, like um, acquiring like more causally effective like knowledge, right? But instead it's like how I feel about it, like how the information sort of corresponds to my sense of self and or my story of self, right? We're emotional beings, and like, so what I think is compelling about like conversation, like as a modality, is it's both like a medium or for like information transfer, for knowledge, generation, but also for like, transformation of perspective by, being with someone and hearing from them, like their direct experience, and finding like correlation or like, empathy or whatever it is. Like I can come away from it, transformed, even if like, I've not really gained anything. So insofar as like, more causally effective knowledge. There's like, so just wanted to highlight that there's sort of that thing going on for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And Jamin, just before I I transition or try to transition over to your comment you've been holding for a
Oh,
while.
take your
Oh, thanks. I wanted to speak to that idea of
I also wanted to say, like, I don't mean to imply or to put upon you that you're looking at the space of conversation in a particular way. I was, but the focus on knowledge graph, which I myself asked, like, I wanted to simply highlight that, like,
right,
that there's this other
right,
thing going on too. So not putting
right,
anything on you, man.
right. I think a good thing, to bear in mind is that there are not just different scales, but different qualities of what a person can attend to. We're not here physically with one another, and there are other things that we could also be, imbibing into our sensorum. Much in the same way, when thinking about these very large data spaces, there are a range of opportunities for interacting with that space. I think the most clear ones are probably like looking at these overlaps between manifolds, looking at distances between groups of people, and their ideas, as manifest by their ideas. And there's also at the very local level, at the nuanced level, looking at the conversation within people who are otherwise very similar to one another, climate scientists, detailing particular key points, right? What is the gravitational constant, or for physicists, what is the rate of heating in something. So detailing each of these individual points is also something that can be expressed within these knowledge spaces. Now you can do that with other other systems, but having a way for people to join that conversation, having this be an open data space where people are seeing the contributions to both the microscopic details of what's going on, as well as the macroscopic pictures that emerge that also have ways of forming having new entities in this ontology that provides some insight into this cluster of nodes gives us this insight. Having that as a particular contribution to this knowledge graph, at the detail level, there's also the ability to contribute and to converse, to critique, and also to respond to criticisms. The fact that we can do this in a data space that is expanding at the same rate as people would want to contribute to it, builds meaning in much the same way as having a one-on-one conversation builds meaning, because it does change people, because it also changes the data space that we're operating with. So I think having a flexible space for recording and and negotiating human knowledge is a really key technology that allows for us to do quite a few things. So like the generalizability and the flexibility of these data spaces is something that I want to hold on to because of the downstream affordances of having that utility built into the data structure itself.
Jamin?
Yeah, that was a thing.
Beautiful. Great stuff. Thank you, Jacob. And thanks, everyone. I want to welcome James Desmond from Cork, Ireland. Feel free to say hello. James is often busy, but so no pressure, James, to even respond or anything like. Thank you. All right, the thumbs up is all I need. I want to talk about, I love this idea of the personal knowledge base. My goodness, absolutely essential, and that's just going to be a basic like operating system level feature of Chizzy, right? Not that it's exclusive to Chizzy, mind you, but it's fundamental. And why have more than one? Well, there could be reasons to have more than one. This is the side of Jamin that I want to present to the world when I'm at a scientific conference. There's a side of me that literally dresses up as Darth Vader and sings Spanish love songs, and other sides of me as well. But anyway, in terms of using these knowledge data, so there's two scenarios that we've talked about, probably many more, but one is basically to connect people, kind of the match.com, of knowledge, right? And knowledge databases for various, intents, purposes, whatever. And then others, I love the whole gaps of knowledge kind of thing, because, just one simple scenario. Here's an example of a climate conversation that I'm dying to have, right? Which is, here's the filters. Do you agree with me that global warming is happening? Yes. Do you believe it's a matter of the heat? Yes. Do you, have you gotten to the point that you realize that SRM is the only way out? Yes. Okay. Do you agree with me that marine cloud brightening is the way as opposed to SAI? Those are the two big ones. No, I believe in SAI. Great. I want yeses on all the first several, but the very last one, I want a no. I want disagreement. So that way we get right to the heart of the matter, and then I can debate Professor David Keith at Harvard or whoever and debunk, SAI. So that's just one example of that. So what I'm really talking about here are highly specific portions of, these knowledge databases, or I love how Victor and company call it epistemic trees, right? So look at very specific, my epistemic tree, compare it with another. What I just presented was a highly specific, even binary, but it doesn't have to be binary. It could be weighted. We could assign weights to each of these things, and also just hard constraints. We have to be in agreement on this and this and this. Otherwise, I'm not interested in having a conversation. Like, I'm not interested in talking with a climate change denier. Now, it's vitally important that climate change denier talk with someone. I just don't want to be that person. So we can get very specific in exactly the kind of conversations we want to have. Other ways of the AI can do kind of deep pattern matching on different problem solution pairs that have been successfully paired up in the past and have solved problems. what were the parallels? Well, they brought in people from these diverse fields. Okay, but what were the epistemic trees of the various participants going into this, and how did they change over time? And what were the catalysts to that change? Well, once I heard Victor talking about epistemic trees, I was just sold on epistemic trees, for example, right? And so based on that deep pattern matching, we can say, okay, we got this raging problem here with apparently no solution. What do? People are calling it intractable, wicked. Okay, well, look back in the database of all the parallels and see what we're able to find. And then say, okay, bring in people from these disciplines. What? But that seems so disparate. Yeah, but it was also the key to solving that problem, homeboy, a few months ago. So check it out. At least consider it. Look, everyone will get invitations to whatever conversations. They'll choose which ones they go to, which brings us back to the Match.com problem, which I'm going to call a non-problem for the following. My dad told me a story when he was in naval ROTC, in training to be a naval officer in parallel with his college university studies. At one point in the summer, they're all in Paris, he and a bunch of other, soon to be naval officers. And my dad gets in touch with this woman who's got a whole bunch of these Ivy League girls also in Paris, and they organize a mixer. Okay. So in the following scenario, imagine there's a big screen TV in this big hotel in the lobby in Paris where they're all about to meet. And you got Jacob giving a presentation about knowledge graphs and this and that and affinity graphs and how we can kind of find the best matches. But and while that's playing, all the soon-to-be naval officers show up in uniform. All these beautiful Ivy League debutantes show up in their dresses. And within seconds, they had all paired off and they were gone, leaving my dad and the gal who kind of led all the Ivy League debutantes. They were just totally alone in the lobby of this hotel. They were gone. The Match.com problem, it's solved. Just do Chizzy, and based on the universal calendar alone and some basic information, even before we get the deeper stuff, the more intense high-tech stuff up and running, people are going to be pairing off and going to the conversations they want to go to and letting her rip. Okay, so that much is a solved problem. Anyway, and as far as the climate change thing, oh goodness. What happens to people like me who stick their necks out far enough, we get character assassination attempts and threats levied at us, and it's serious stuff. And so they suppress the actual knowledge of what's really going on. Why? Because lots of people are making money.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, because lots of people are making lots of money on green tech. That's all I had to say.
So I just wanted to say for posterity, and James, I apologize because apparently I miss you every week. We are at about an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes. I'm just wondering if we want to go around just for the recording, like not to end the conversation, but just for posterity, if we want to kind of bookend anything. Yeah. So, an amazing conversation, which I am going to have to review myself a couple times. I don't know, Jamin, do you want to walk through everyone first, or do you want to just yield at the moment? What do you they not yield like totally end it down? Just
I yield, and but if anyone has questions,
last thoughts could take like a half an hour here, right? So I'm good with that. Victor, would you like to do last thoughts, or James, do you want to do a first thought, last thought? It's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Cool. So yeah, I'm coming away transformed from this conversation, right? In like a sort of clearer understanding of the category. And by the way, like with the question of like whether transformational conversations is the category, or conversations themselves, or just conversation, the larger
just
category.
Conversations, because I used to filter it by transformational, but then it becomes a fuzzy filter, and some people will just get discouraged from even trying to apply because they're not going to,
Gotcha.
and then I'm branded as untransformational. No. Conversation. We'll take conversations, because who knows what gold lies beneath You
Mm,
know, the
love it.
housewives playing bridge and chatting amongst themselves while they're drinking tea. Passing by, it might just sound like the most boring thing in the universe because they mentioned Marge and her garden. But wait 5 minutes and oh my God, solid gold.
I hear you. Yeah, it makes sense. Second is that like yeah, with respect to knowledge graphs, I'm now thinking of like epistemic manifold or I don't know, like like and I feel like there is something there, and it makes me want to reach out to Jacob to like well,
Let's go.
we've hit on a few things, man. We've hit on a few things. I wanna work share with you some of the stuff that I'm working on, and like ask for your help, or like see what kind of mutual affordances we can find together there.
Yeah, let's definitely collaborate.
And I'm feeling complete.
And
Thank you.
and I'm going to be peppering like that guy who worked with Johnny Carson. Marco will remember the name, but anyway, just kind of peppering with thoughts here and there. In terms of epistemic manifold, I started a startup once called Spectral Radius, which is the maximum. I know Jacob knows what I'm talking about. I'll let Jacob describe it. He'd do way better.
No, I don't
Oh,
know.
okay. The spectral
For the
radius.
context
So
of
let's
time.
say there's 17 different dimensions, you know, in a space, and you've got 2 points in that space. The maximum that so for each dimension there's like a maximum radius or ellipse or whatever about which, you know, something can go in that space, the maximum distance. Take all 17 dimensions, find the maximum for each, and then define the vector, which is the sum of all those maximal components, all summed together. Voila! It's like the deepest radius in space. Like if you imagine the universe is an ellipsoid, it's kind of like the farthest point. So find the spectral radius and then say, okay, where are you relative to the spectral radius? Are you guys, because that creates an absolute measure. You have either between 0 and the spectral radius, 2 Siamese twins who believe the same thing, 0 distance, 0 separation. You know, Donald Trump and, you know, somebody very different from Donald Trump, they're going to be probably at the spectral radius or near the spectral radius of distance. So it creates a scalar between 0 and 1. Anyway, powerful stuff.
Well, I don't know if Jacob is still there, if he had to dip off. Marco, oh, Jacob, go ahead.
I don't know what happened to it. I don't know that it matters, but
No,
yeah,
it's
that's
okay.
the thing. I just wanted to highlight this background, right? Like, you know, it's the Laniakea supercluster. We're sitting out here. You see the Milky Way. We're adjacent to our local group, you know, which includes the Virgo cluster and this great attractor whose gravitational force, you know, like it affects us and the other members of our local group. But if you haven't ever seen it before, I always encourage people to look at Hubble's ultra deep field image, where they look at like a patch of sky in like Gemini's you know, headspace, and you know they focus in on this patch of dark sky, like focus with this amazing telescope out in outer space. And what you see from that image will inspire you. I will spoil it. It's like hundreds of whole galaxies. And this is an impression of where all of these whole galaxies are distributed throughout, you know, the local space of our Laniakea supercluster. There's a lot of stuff out there. And, you know, if humanity doesn't like kill itself like shortly, there's a lot more that we're gonna, you know, get into. There's a lot of stuff out there, you know, like quintillion, you know, dollars asteroids just flying by, whole planets that like rain diamonds, you know, like out like as close as Neptune, right? Raining diamonds out there. You know, we've got a lot that we can do, and I think it really begins with us just stop being so tribal and working together. You know, and how do we do that?
Go ahead. Oh, sorry, Jacob.
Yeah, we gotta have the conversation. But that's my soapbox.
Raining diamonds is the quote now, Jacob, by the way. But Victor, go ahead.
I love I love that you highlighted the background, Jacob. I've never seen it before. That's amazing. A great attractor. Oof, gorgeous. And yes, I've seen the deep field, and yes, like it was a transformational experience.
Now we're back.
I just got to
Marco,
jump in
yeah,
with
go
a
ahead,
with a
please.
quick synchronicity again. It's like, how often do you think that Hubble scope that you just mentioned, you can access that database and you can look, you encourage people to go there. This morning, while I was killing time before the block party started and while it was slow in the beginning, I was watching a video from with Dr. Rudy Shield presenting on black holes, wormholes, and dark energy. And he said the same thing, almost word for word, what you just said. It's like, how much more do you need of a sign that we're on the right fucking track? Just beautiful.
Yeah, I will take this opportunity. So I don't know who's actually doing the recording for posterity, but yeah, Jamin, well then why don't you like walk us out, and then we can still chat afterwards, but I like the idea of having a nice bookend here.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the bookend. I just want to make sure that we've gotten all the juice out of every respective orange. So give it one last squeeze, everyone. And James, feel free to make it your first and last if you want, if you're available. Just jump in,
Sorry,
anyone who wants to.
my apologies. I had to go to the door there. There was someone at the door, and you know what I mean. So I got distracted for a few minutes. But so I missed a little bit there the last 5 minutes or so. Apologies. But yeah, I was loving what I heard, as little as much as I did because I came a bit late. My apologies for that as well. But yeah, I'm loving what I hear, but I really don't want to comment because I kind of came in halfway through and everything. But you know, I'm loving what Jacob was, his description, and yeah, I'll say no more. Just love it all, and nice to meet you, Jacob. Good to see you again, Victor. Good to see you, Michael, Marco, and Jamin. And love you all, and God bless. Hopefully, catch you again next week. Pass the bit up.
Strengthen the
Yeah, and feel
journey
free
very
to
well.
feel free to hang out in the afterglow, and everyone's welcome to the afterglow. And you can always find the link to this Zoom meeting on the homepage of radish.org, as in Radical Collective Intelligence. Passing the feather.
Well, that was it, Jamin. If we're gonna wind down, that's we'll move to the afterglow.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and look forward to seeing you all in the afterglow. So we'll just exit this room, and thank you all for watching, and tune in and join us next time, every Friday from 12 to 2 Pacific time. All right. See you all soon. God bless. Thanks, everyone.